You speak 3 languages. Can you think of anything to say in one of them?
I'd love to. Well, this morning started as any other morning.
I was on the train. I wish I was dressed a little more appropriately, and you were sleeping.
So Steve woke me up and asked me if I heard the news yet, which I sincerely wish would never be in existence.
And I told Andre about what was obviously well known at the time. You definitely know what we're talking about now, and that's the Lokomotiv tragedy. And we thought for a long time of what to say in this video because, you know, normally we like to make you laugh. And I was reminded of an article that I read recently from one of my favorite journalists over here in Canada. His name is Jeff Merrick, and he wrote about what happened to Wade Belak recently. And he didn't write about it saying, you know, just how tragic everything was and basically very obvious things. Instead, he told a story of Wade Belak, the person he knew. And we can't tell you anything you don't already know. Things from reports, you know, what you've heard in the news. So what we think is appropriate is to tell you some stories.
If you watched our pilot, you might recognize this hat. Some of you may as well wonder where the hell it comes from. This hat originally belonged to Yuri Uruchev. For those of you who don't know who Yuri Uruchev was, he used to play for Lokomotiv Yaroslavl. So here's my hat story. Right before the World Juniors in Buffalo, I was visiting my friend Nikita Filatov in Columbus, Ohio. So I was leaving to Buffalo from his place and I was putting my Team Canada hat on because that was the only hat I had. So Filatov gave me this look as if I just stole his retirement money. And he told me to take the hat off. His reasoning was great. He thought that if I were to wear this hat in Buffalo, Team Canada would inevitably win the championship. I had to write a preview for the World Juniors in Buffalo, and in my article I included a part where I was saying that I wasn't going to wear a hat no matter how cold it would get. I don't know if you ever were in Buffalo, but it's pretty cold in winter over there. I held my word. I didn't wear the hat for the entire championship. And when Team Russia came back to the hotel, I was right there to meet them. The place looked chaotic. The players were everywhere, the fans were everywhere, everybody was hugging everyone. Russian players were giving fans a whole bunch of stuff. Hockey sticks, pucks, hats, everything. Through the crowd I see Yuri Uruchev, who looks at me. Even though there was a whole bunch of people between him and me, he started to make his way towards me. Next thing I know, he lends me this. And he goes, "I guess you could use it now."
I didn't know any of the players on the plane like Andre did, but I do have a couple stories. Alexander Karpatsev and Igor Korolev, 2 guys that used to play on the Leafs, were players I grew up watching. And this is from when I was a child, because I think it was the last year the Leafs played at Maple Leaf Gardens, which would have made it 1999. And it's 4-4. I'm pretty sure the Leafs were playing Tampa Bay, and the game went into overtime. First overtime game I've ever seen live. And in between the 3rd period and overtime, my dad goes, "Would you like to leave? Because it's going to be crazy getting out of here." And he is right. There's always a mad dash for the exit. It's hard to catch our train. But I didn't want to leave. It was my first overtime game. I'm 11 years old. What are you, nuts, Dad? So we stayed and watched the overtime, and it's a good thing that we did because the Leafs ended up winning the game. In all the chaos, I didn't quite see who scored the goal, but when I looked up at the board, Igor Korolev. And that's what I'll always remember about him.
I had another friend at this plane. His name is Daniil Sobchenko. You might remember him for the last World Juniors in Buffalo, where he was playing in the first line with Vladimir Tarasenko and Maxim Kitsin. I do remember our very first conversations with Sobchenko. That was the spring of 2009. I basically just started working as a hockey journalist. That was right on the verge of Under-18 World Championship in Fargo. As so many other players, Sobchenko didn't make the team mainly because of his dispute with Team Russia head coach Vladimir Plющev. We were having an interview where Sobchenko was saying a lot of stuff that he shouldn't have been saying. Sobchenko was giving me some comments about certain players who made the roster. Let's put it this way, according to him, some of the guys made the team not because they were terrific at hockey. Back then I was pretty inexperienced and I couldn't believe my own ears that he was telling me this stuff. So after we were done, I told him that I wasn't going to publish it. But he told me that he would stand by his word and would approve of anything that I would publish. And that's the Sobchenko I know. That's the guy who would go into a battle on and off the ice. I guess that's qualifiers for being an honest person and an honest hockey player.
During his time in the NHL, I always thought Pavel Demitra was so underrated. For the amount of points he put up, he wasn't talked about as much as you would think. And the first time I got to see him play live was during the semifinals at the Olympics. Canada's up 3-0, everything looks great. And then it was 3-2. And a lot of Canadians try to block this out, but remember when Demitra was just this close from tying it up? I know myself and everyone in my section, from the angle that we were, because we were on the opposite side of Demitra, we thought it was in, for sure. Slovakia would end up losing the game 3-2, but what I remember about Demitra was the handshakes after, and smiling with his former teammate Roberto Luongo. He just lost a close, hard-fought game with Luongo, but always kept that sportsmanship, and it looked like he was genuinely happy that a friend moved on. And that's a sign of not just a good hockey player, but a good person.
As you may know, hockey community isn't exactly the largest on earth. Everyone knows each other, everyone feels each other, so that when a tragedy like this occurs, everyone notices. Luckily enough, in the entire history of hockey, there has never been a tragedy like this.
Well, a long time ago, there was something somewhat similar to this, and certainly Leafs fans would know about Bill Barilko. Now, granted, it wasn't an entire hockey team, but it was a tragedy nonetheless. And after scoring a Stanley Cup winning goal for the Toronto Maple Leafs, that summer he passed away in a plane crash. And there's been lots of talk about this between Derek Boogaard's death, Rick Rippon's death, Wade Belak's death. This already might have been the worst summer in hockey history. And then to have something as unimaginable as the Lokomotiv accident, this summer's been just terrible. And we talked about how this affects the hockey community, and it does, but these were people before they were players, and this affects so many lives and families.
Obviously enough, we extend our deepest condolences to friends and families of the players, but let's not forget just how much easier and more fun they made our lives when they laced him up and played hockey. Shortly after this terrible event, there was this guy who made up a whole video dedicated to Lokomotiv. And me and Steve both agree that we couldn't do a better job, so we're just gonna thank this guy for the video and show it to you.
Фантастический